Book of Heaven, Volume 29, Part 6. May 4th, 1931. Power of the Word of Jesus. How the repeated acts are like juice for the plants. Forced pains lose freshness. Jesus wants to be free in the soul. My abandonment in the divine volition continues. Its sweet empire attracts my poor will. And even though very often it would want to, as though enter the field to make its way, given the painful circumstances I find myself in, yet the omnipotent Fiat, with the irresistible strength of its light, fixes itself upon the night of my will, and prevents my step, and forming its day of light in my soul, it draws me to do my little acts in its divine volition. And I was thinking to myself, why does Jesus have so much interest that I do not neglect my repeated acts in his adorable will? And Jesus, all tenderness and goodness, told me, my daughter, because all the acts that you do in your interior are acts taught and formed by me. So they are my acts, and I do not want you to remain behind without uniting yourself together with me in order to follow them. In fact, you must know that when I do a crafting in the soul, when I speak and teach, your Jesus has such power as to convert the good taught and operated in the creature into her nature. And good in nature cannot be destroyed. It would be as if you had the eye given to you by God as property of your nature, and you would not make use of it in order to look, or voice, hands, feet, and you would not make use of them in order to speak, to operate, and walk. Would you not be worthy of condemnation? Now, just as I give gifts in nature to the body, in the same way, when I speak, my creative word has the power to give to the soul, as though in nature, the gift which I intend to give with my word. In fact, one fiat of mine can enclose a heaven, a sun, an incessant prayer, as gift, with which my fiat has the power to convert these gifts, as though into the soul's nature. So what you do in your interior are gifts in nature, which my word has formed in you. Therefore, you will be attentive, not to keep my gifts as useless. I placed them in you, so that with these repeated acts in my will, we may together impetrate the great gift that my divine will come to reign upon earth. More so, good daughter, since the repeated acts are like juice for the plant. If the plant has no juice, it withers, and cannot produce either flowers or fruits. The juice is like the vital blood of the plant, which, circulating in it, preserves it, makes it grow, and makes it produce the most beautiful and tasty fruits, such as to form the glory and the profit of the farmer. But this juice does not form on its own in the plant. It is the farmer that must be attentive to water it and cultivate it, and not once, but always, giving it as though in nature, sufficient juice, so that the poor plant may find the daily nourishment in order to vegetate and grow, to be able to give its fruits to the one who cultivates it. But if the farmer is slothful, the plant loses the juice and dies. See then what the repeated acts are. They are the blood of the soul, the nourishment, the preservation, and the growth of my gifts. And I, as celestial farmer, never cease watering you, so there is no danger that I might be slothful. But you must receive this vital juice, and only then do you receive it, when you repeat the acts in my will in the depth of your soul. Then you open your mouth, and I, watering you, give you blood in your soul, so as to give you divine warmth, celestial nourishment, and adding for you more words of mine. I preserve you, and I increase my gifts. Oh, if the plant had reason and refused to be watered by the farmer, what would be the lot of the poor plant? The lot of losing life. And what sorrow for the poor farmer! Therefore, to repeat the acts is to want life. It is to take the nourishment. To repeat is to love and appreciate and satisfy the yearnings and make your celestial farmer content, who with so much love has worked in the field of your soul. And as I hear you repeat your acts, whether together with me or on your own, you give me the fruits of my work, and I feel loved back and repaid for the many gifts I have given you. And I dispose myself to give you greater gifts. Therefore, be attentive, and let your constancy be the winning strength that conquers and dominates your Jesus. After this, I felt as if I was about to fall into my usual state of suffering, and given the present impositions, I felt reluctant to accept. My poor nature trembled, and I felt like saying with my sweet Jesus, Father, if it be possible, let this chalice pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. And my beloved Jesus added, My daughter, I do not want you in forced pains, but voluntary, because forced pains lose the freshness, the beauty, and the sweet enchantment of the likeness of the pains of your Jesus, which were all suffered voluntarily by me. And they are like those withered flowers, like those unripe fruits, which the sight disdained to look at, and the mouth cannot swallow. So great is the insipidness and the hardness of those fruits. You must know that when I elect a soul, I form in her my residence, and in my house I want to be free to do what I want, and to be as I please. Nor do I want any restriction on the part of the creature. I want absolute freedom. Otherwise, I would render myself unhappy and hampered in my way of acting. It would be the greatest misfortune, even for the poorest one, not to enjoy freedom in his little hovel. and I would incur the misfortune of a poor person, who having formed with great love a residence for himself, once he has furnished it and placed it in order, enters it in order to live in it, but to his greatest sorrow, impositions and restrictions are made upon him. He is told, "In this room you cannot sleep, in this you cannot receive, through this other one you cannot pass." In sum, he cannot be there as he wants, nor do what he wants. So, poor one, he feels unhappy, because he has lost his freedom, and he is regretful of the sacrifices he made, of having built this residence. So I am. How many works, how many sacrifices, how many graces have I not poured in order to render a creature my residence? And when I take possession of it, more than anything, I love and want freedom in my house. And when I find now reluctances, now restrictions, instead of the residence adapting itself to me, it is I who must adapt myself to it. Therefore, I cannot carry out my life, nor my divine ways. And it is not given to me to fulfill the purpose for which, with so much love, I chose this residence. Therefore, I want freedom. And if you want to make me happy, leave me free to do what I want. Fiat. May 10th, 1931. One who wants to receive must give. Ways that Jesus has. The divine gifts, bearers of peace. How the divine will has the fermenting virtue. What good a fulfilled act of divine will encloses. I am always in the dear inheritance of the divine will. Wherever I turn, my mind, my step, I find it as ruling queen, who with her sweet empire wants to reign over my poor soul. And with the most eloquent, gentle, and powerful voice, says to me, swooning with love, such as to be able to convert the whole entire world into fire, "As queen, I await you in each of my works, that you may come to form and extend your little divine kingdom in my own works. Look at me. I am queen, and one who is queen has the power to give to her children whatever she wants. More so, since my kingdom is universal, my power is without limits. And as queen, I love to not be alone in my kingdom, but I want the cortege, the company of my children, and to share with them my universal empire. Therefore let your way be my works, which like many signs will direct you to making many encounters with your celestial queen, who awaits you to give you her gifts as the sure pledge of her kingdom." Then, while my mind was wandering in the immense light of the divine will, my always lovable Jesus told me, "My daughter, one who wants to receive must give. Giving disposes the creature to receive, and God to give. Many times also your Jesus has this way. When I want something from the creature, I give. And if I want great sacrifices, I give much. so that in looking at the much I have given, she will feel ashamed and will not have the courage to deny me the sacrifice I ask of her. To give is to almost bind the person who receives. It is to draw his attention, his love. To give is to appreciate. To give is hope. To give is to make the memory of the giver arise in the heart. And how many times people who did not know each other become friends by means of a gift. Now, in the divine order, the giver is always God, who acts as first in sending his gifts to the creature. But if she does not move to give something to her Creator, be it even her little love, her gratitude, a small sacrifice, because if we gave, it was because we wanted. No more gifts are sent by us, because by not giving us anything, she has closed the correspondence and has broken the beautiful friendship which our gift was to make arise. Now, my daughter, to give and to receive are first and indispensable acts, which in clear notes indicate that we love the creature and that she loves us. But this is not enough. One must know how to receive by converting the good received into one's nature, by eating it and masticating it thoroughly, in such a way as to convert the gift into the soul's blood. This is our purpose in giving our gifts, wanting to see the gift we gave converted into her nature, because then are our gifts not in danger, and we dispose ourselves to give greater gifts. And the creature, having converted it into her nature, places our gift in safety, becomes the possessor of it, and shall feel within herself the good, the font, and the good received, converted into her nature. And since our gifts are bearers of peace, of happiness, of invincible strength, of celestial air, she shall feel within herself the nature of peace, of happiness, of divine strength, which will form in her the air of heaven. This is the reason why, when I give you the great gift of my word, then I remain silent. It is because I am waiting for you to nourish yourself and masticate my word well, in such a way as to see in you, changed into your nature, that which I have told you. And when I see this, then I feel the irresistible need of love to speak to you again, because one gift of mine calls for another, nor can they remain alone. And I have always something to give, always something to say and to do, with one who converts my gifts into her nature. After this, I was thinking about the divine will, how it seemed difficult to me that its kingdom might come. And my beloved Jesus added, "My daughter, just as the yeast has the virtue of fermenting the bread, so is my will the fermentator of the acts of the creature. As she calls my divine will into her acts, they remain fermented by it, and form the bread of the kingdom of my will. Now, in order to make much bread, the yeast is not enough, but it takes much flour. It takes someone who must do these acts of uniting flour and yeast. It takes water, bond of union, to be able to knead flour and yeast, so that the yeast may communicate the fermenting virtue, and the flour may receive it. Then it takes the fire to cook this bread, to form it as nourishing and digestible bread. Now, does it not take more time, more acts to form it rather than to eat it? The sacrifice is in forming it. As for eating it, it is done quickly, and one feels the taste of the sacrifice. So, my daughter, the yeast of my divine fiat, which has only the virtue of fermenting your acts, emptying them of the human will, in order to convert them into bread of divine will, is not enough, but it takes a continuation of acts, of sacrifices, and for a long time, in such a way that my will, with its fermenting virtue, will ferment all these acts, so as to form much bread, and keep it prepared and in store for the children of its kingdom. When everything will be formed, what is left is to dispose the events. And this is easier, and is done quickly, because it is in our power to move the secondary causes in order to do what we want. Did I not do likewise for redemption? My long 30 years of my hidden life were like the yeast, in which all my acts were fermented, to form and ferment the great good of redemption. The short life of my public life and my passion was my fermented bread, that my divine will formed, and fermented in my acts, that like bread I broke for all and gave to eat, so that all might receive the bread of the redeemed ones, to acquire the necessary strength, to put themselves in safety. Therefore give yourself no concern. Think of doing your duty, and letting not one of your acts escape in which you do not put the yeast of my divine will, so that your being may remain fermented by it, and I will think of all the rest. Then I continued thinking, but what does Jesus get from this poor state of mine? And why does he have so much interest that I fall into my usual sufferings? With so much trouble and bother that he causes me to give to others, such that I could call this my martyrdom. Oh, how hard it is having to deal with creatures, feeling the need of them out of pure necessity. This humiliates me so much that I remain as though annihilated in my own nothingness. But while I was thinking of this and other things, my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, do you want to know what I get? My divine will fulfilled. And this is everything for me. One fulfilled act of mine, of my will, encloses all the heavens, the sun, the earth, and even myself. There is no love which I do not find, goods which it does not possess, glory which it does not give me. Everything remains centralized in one fulfilled act of my will. And the happy creature that fulfills it can say to me, 'I have given you everything, even yourself. I have nothing more to give you. In fact, my divine will encloses everything. There is not one thing or good that might escape it. Therefore, by fulfilling it in what I want, the creature finds that which my will is in itself. And I can say, by giving you the grace of letting you do a fulfilled act of it, I gave you everything. Even more, by fulfilling it, my pains rise. My steps, my words, my works are doubled and put themselves in motion to give themselves to creatures. Because my divine will, operating also in the creature, puts all our works in motion to make them rise to new life. And you tell me, what do I get? My daughter, think of doing it, and make it so that your life may be a continued act of my will. Fiat. May 16th, 1931. The Divine Will, confirmer of the acts of the creature. Ardor of divine love in creating man. Touches of the divine qualities. I am always at the start in my dear inheritance of the divine fiat. It seems to me that it whispers to my ear, as it was in the beginning, I shall always be, world without end. You too, if you remain in my divine will, shall be always equal to yourself. You shall never change action. You shall always do my will. And the variety of your actions you shall be able to call effects of that first and single act of it, which flows in your acts to make them one, and that has the virtue of producing, like sun, the beautiful rainbow of the variety of colors as the effect of its light, without changing its one act of always giving light. What happiness is felt in the soul in being able to say, I do always the divine will. Now I felt my little and poor intelligence absorbed in the light of the divine will, and I felt within me the one and powerful strength of it, and its innumerable effects, and the variety of them, forming a circle around me and investing me. They were bearers of joy, of peace, of strength, of goodness, of love, of sanctity, of indescribable beauty. These effects were like many kisses of life that were given to my soul, and I remained their possessor. I was left amazed by this, and my always lovable Jesus told me, my daughter, all the acts done by the creature in the divine will are confirmed by God as divine acts, and this confirmation forms the life of the same acts, and they are sealed with the divine seal as everlasting acts, always new, fresh, and of an enchanting beauty. The acts done by the creature in my will I could call new creation that I make in the creature, as she keeps doing her act in it. My fiat asserts itself with its creative strength, and forms in it its act, and by right it confirms it. It happens as it happened in creation. Since the creative strength of my will ran in creating many things, they remained immutable, without ever changing. Have the heavens, the stars, the sun, perhaps changed? Not at all. As they were created, so they are, because wherever my will places its creative strength, there remains the perennial life of its own act. And as it confirms, it can never change. See then what it means to do and live in my divine will, to be under the empire of a creative and confirming strength, which places all the acts of the creature in safety, rendering them immutable. So, by living in my will, she will remain confirmed in the good that she does, in the sanctity that she wants, in the knowledge that she possesses, in the triumph of the sacrifice. Our divinity, of our own spontaneous will, is under the empire of a love that runs irresistibly, for it wants to give to the creature. So much so that in creating man, he was created in our ardor of love, by the touches of our divine qualities. Our divine being pure spirit, had neither hands nor feet. Our qualities served us as hands in order to form man, and pouring over him like a mighty torrent, we molded him, and touching him, we infused in him the effects of our supreme qualities. These touches have remained in man, and this is why certain beautiful qualities of goodness, of ingenuity, of intelligence, and so forth, can be seen in him. They are the virtue of our divine touches, that continuing to mold man, produces their effects. They are our pledges of love, with which we kneaded him, which even though he does not remember, and perhaps does not even know us, continue their perennial office of loving him. And since, when one touches an object or a person, the one who touches feels the impression of the person touched, just as our touches of the divine qualities remained in man, so did the impression of having touched him remain in our supreme qualities. So we feel him within us. How not to love him? Therefore, whatever man might do, we go toward him with new devices of love, and with our pleasant refrain of loving him always. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 29, Part 6. Fiat.